All right, let's continue with this afternoon's discussion. We were talking with Jim about inner world and Shambhala. People brought up Shangri-La, more unexplained mysteries. And if you were in charge of Earth, as an overlord, so to speak, and you did not want the people of Earth to know of your position, then it would be right up your alley to create mysteries, purposely, to confound people, to keep them in the dark, in confusion, and in ignorance. So let's look at this angle for a while here, and have you put your thinking caps on. For many thousands of years now, there's been a steady investment in the people of Earth by the visiting extraterrestrials to pass themselves off as gods, so to speak, or God, and to create all manner of holes in the story. And what does God usually require of its people? Who knows?
Obedience.
Obedience, yes, that's first of all obedience, and obedience falls under the general title of worship. Yes, worship. And you know, there are those who have said, perhaps it was Mr. Sitchin or someone, that worship means to work for the gods. How do you like that? To work for the gods. Lots of people would find that to be a very powerful definition. Work for the God. Yes, I believe I want to work for God. That is what I'm here on earth to do, to work for the Lord, to work for God.
You know, sorry to interject, but Goldman Sachs believes that they do God's work.
Goldman Sachs
Yes, they do.
believe that they do God's work. And you know, Steve, lots of people believe that they do God's work, investing in the upliftment of humankind. Perhaps even Bill Gates believes he does God's work as well. And so it just is a matter of your definition. As we said, there are beliefs, and there are perspectives, and then there are your perceptions. Today we are expanding your perceptions, investing in a greater awareness as to unexplained mysteries that, as you are going to come to the conclusion, nothing's really unexplained at all. It's sort of a big birthday party ongoing for children, as you are treated like children, to keep you confused, to purposely set up situations that in your few decades of life become confounded and confused. And you know, the Anunnaki are very aware that you live again and again. And it is in some way their rationale for tricking you, for getting you to believe false things. They feel, or even to get you to go and fight their wars. Remember, a long time ago, to work for the gods meant that you carried out their battles on earth. And even some gods would reward you. If you died in battle, then you would immediately be going to the higher realms of heaven, etc. So when one examines these stories without beliefs and perspectives getting all wound up together, when one puts beliefs aside and you are beliefless for a while, just observing, just putting the data together, and if you can detach enough, and if you can get your DNA to keep quiet, again, these Anunnakis like to work with your DNA to get you all fired up. if you can keep things pretty quiet, you realize that it makes no difference who the gods were. That there's holes in the story. On recess, you were talking about the Jesus story. People, we will tell you again and again and again and again that the story as you have heard it with Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and all the other players, it is not a reality. It was constructed much later on to suit the needs of the church. The mother church that allows no women. Fascinating, yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and Sue, you were bringing up the idea that our vehicle was said something about it's all an Anunnaki game as to which god they want to put in front of the people. And you said that you were reading The End Days by Mr. Sitchin, and
yes.
that he concluded,
he theorized that Marduk was the Jesus character.
Marduk played the role of the Jesus character. And we would say, if you remember correctly from our early works, we said that the Jesus situation was set up as a holographic insert. To wrap your head around that one. And so it is a bit of buffoonery and foolishness when humans relate to the Jesus story, a story that was never really there. It is like people saying, well, I was Prince Charming in the Cinderella story. You must understand, people, that the conscious mind really desires to put things together, even if it puts things together erroneously. And the Anunnaki want you to put things together erroneously. They want you to worship something. And they want to steer you away from understanding reincarnation. Because if you understand reincarnation, and if you start remembering and really putting things together, rather than being flattered by who you think you were in another lifetime, that is your biggest downfall, folks. If you feel flattered by some psychic who tells you that you were Mrs. George Washington or Mrs. Santa Claus or Mrs. Easter Bunny. You get the point, yes?
Yes.
That it is foolishness. And sometimes people do cross their timelines. But often the association of who was who and when is completely bogus. Completely. You have people on the world today who are claiming they are this person and this person and this person. Yet you have really powerful people who are no good nicks, who really steer away from letting anyone know who they are while they travel around the planet in their own footprints. So there's a danger to some of the old reincarnated players, many of which who have had strong Anunnaki influence, and these would be brutal tyrants, for example, who kept people in ignorance, who forced people to obey. This would be part of carrying on an Anunnaki story, to make certain that the people of Earth are kept busy, that they worship, and that they never put the Anunnaki story together. Yet, that they keep reasserting the presence of the Anunnaki everywhere. In the Western world, that presence of the Anunnaki is reasserted in homes around the world with the presence of the cross and a dead Jesus on that cross. A warning of sorts that if you dare to go to the cross, the planet of the crossing, it is dangerous. and death could await you. It's one way of looking at it. The cross is part of a grid. You live in a grid of energy. You cannot perceive it, but you are in a fabric, a grid of energy. That grid has many, many layers to it. Some like to label those layers in terms of numbers. But, numbers are irrelevant. Some people like to give those levels names. Yet you live in a name called the third dimension. And your mind, your energy field, your awareness, your perceptions, it moves in and out of dimensions all the time. It moves between various levels of the grid or the energy. We were speaking earlier about magnetic anomalies and black holes. These would be points contrary to the grid. If you think about a grid, it is lined up, much as the Masonics learned to grid a city. North and south, east and west. This creates a grid. You look at the game board, the black and white checkered. We've said it's a map for navigating reality. It's a grid. If you look at the spiral or the black hole, it is the antithesis of a grid. And yet the spiral is an indicator of the shape of many things, whether you are looking at a seashell or the shape of the galaxy. So we just want you all to be more alert to the idea of your own sloppy thinking and your own sloppy beliefs. And see if you can spend an afternoon or an hour at least and say to yourself, all right, I'm going to be beliefless this afternoon, and see what ideas come in while I'm working in the garden, and allow myself to receive rather than to force things to fit into my beliefs. So now let's go back to creatures and the underworld and some of the challenges that you are facing as a people with some of the developments within the underworld. First of all, there's been an acceleration, as there are at times, in quakes. You had a few weeks ago a series of quakes that occurred along the border of India and Nepal, near the vicinity of Mount Everest. This is very big because, as we've said, Mount Everest is your highest mountain, and if you want to find visitors, particularly the Anunnaki, they really value the mountain. They taught this to the Chinese. Put the mountain to your back. All right? The mountain is to your back. It is in the north, and you are going to look forward to the south with the mountain behind you. Knowing this, knowing their preference for mountains, and knowing the historical evidence of preference for mountains by the gods to retreat to the mountains, even for the monasteries, you'll find them in some of the most outrageous perches of mountains that you can imagine. Go to a bookstore sometime and get a book on monasteries. Jim, this may help you. And you'll see that they're almost impossible to get to. Outrageous places. How could one even conceive to build there unless one was being constantly telepathed to and instructed by the Anunnaki? Maybe you will remember this, Jim, and it will expand your perceptions. Those in monasteries, those in any high position, they are in constant telepathic contact with others. This is why they meditate. This is why the admonishment for you and others to meditate. Meditation calms the mind on a very basic level. It teaches you how to be silent, how to quiet all that chatter, changes the brainwave cycles. Once you become a decent meditator and you are able to quiet the mind, guess what happens? It is like you put a sign up that says open. If you are a shop owner, you have a little sign. When you want the shop open, you put open, you flip it over for closed. When you are not in the body and you are, for whatever reasons, not liking the body and doing your best to ignore it or to debase it, you put up a sign that says vacancy. That is perfect for a sign for the possessions and the entities to come on down and to hold open house in your physical body. And many people are paying this price dearly today. But when you are a meditator and you learn how to silence the mind, there's like a sign that says open for business. It means you are in charge and that you are there. But it also means that because you can quiet the yip-yap, you qualify to receive information from other sources. Now, in a religious point of view, they would say, it's God speaking, or the guides or higher realms. But forget all of that and look at all religions as simply being a club of the Anunnaki. All right? Clubs. This is Sunday. There's lots of club meetings today. The people who belong to their clubs belong in different levels. Some would be more valuable members than others, just like a team sport, for example. There are going to be star players on a team, and the rest are going to be sort of support. So, in religions, especially those that would be in the East, Buddhism, etc., they are encouraged to be silent, to meditate, to go into seclusion. And some people lose their mind, some people gain a little bit of insight, some people have the ability to right away shoot out of the body. And they can look from above. And as we've mentioned before, one of the challenges that the, let's say, abbot, the person in charge of the monastery, may look for would be someone who could describe the shape of the monastery from above. This would be an indication of the success of the meditator. In the eastern regions of the world, oftentimes people meditate on a picture. What is it called, the picture? Who knows?
A yantra.
It's called what?
A yantra, like a mantra is a sound.
Yes.
A yantra is an image or depiction, a symbol that you meditate on.
And sometimes they are round and they have colors and things inside of them.
That's a mandala.
A mandala, yes, that's what we were looking for, mandala. And what they find is the mandala, by staring at it, then closing the eyes, the mandala can catapult a person eventually out of the body. And the mandala then can help them have a bird's eye view of perhaps how the monastery is laid out, such as the site on Java called Borobudur. So the point of taking people into religious orders, nuns, priests, monks, etc., would be to train them to find out who would be a good radio receiver. The ancient people of long ago used to use gemstones. They knew how to lay out crystals jade in particular, diamonds, emeralds, what are some of the others? Sapphires, rubies.
Quartz.
What is it?
Quartz.
Quartz, yes, we are using quartz. You lay these out in certain patterns, and the DNA of the practitioner can literally light up and use the semi-precious stones as a radio device. You have biblical evidence of this in something called what?
Aaron's breastplate.
Aaron's breastplate. So you are on it today. Must be you've been studying, or you've been away from the electronics that they're nurturing your brain here. Aaron's breastplate. Now, Aaron was who?
Who was he the son of? Was he the son of Abraham?
No.
No, he wasn't. All right. Aaron, right? Jacob.
Aaron is more aligned in the Moses realm.
Oh, the Moses.
In that time period. In other words, Aaron had DNA, Anunnaki DNA, that, let's say, Enki DNA, that would facilitate his ability to wear the breastplate, have the stones on it, and to literally be a living radio communicator. Later on, as time proceeded forward, now we are talking about 3,000 or more years later, 4,000 years later, humans, many of them, lost the ability. This is why things were made up during the last 2,000 years. Trickery of all kind was done. Children were gathered, especially in the East, put into monasteries. They were deprived. Some were sexually abused. Everything was done to see if they could activate the human to become a literal radio, to speak with the Anunnaki. And of course, only once in a great while do they find someone who had this bloodline and this capability. And it was all, quote, an unexplained mystery. No one understood DNA. No one understood that at times the Anunnaki were out of range, so to speak, or that their systems were down, or that the signals coming from humankind were just not being boosted enough. Now, you recently had another earthquake just a few days ago in the region that we are speaking of, alluding to, Tibet, Nepal, Mongolia, this area that Jim brought up as far as being a sensitive area for his timeline, but also a very sensitive area for the planetary timeline. And it was not so long ago, we believe George Bush #2 visited Mongolia. Not the usual place on one's world travels. He went to Ulaanbaatar, and you'll see that soon others watch for who visits into Mongolia. We believe the Chinese leader Xi just went there, or some such. Now, this is where it has been reported that there have long been activities coming and going from the center of the earth. The Ulaanbaatar is a modern city, of course, yet surrounded by yurts, yaks, very, very primitive people. And it is the primitives, the indigenous people from Australia to the deserts of the US to Mongolia, or even into the high Serengeti of Africa. Those who sleep under the stars, watch the skies, rest the head upon the earth. They are the ones who know more. And often what they see, they don't think anything of it. They are removed from modern culture. They are entrained in the old ways. And so the comings and goings of star beings or inner earth creatures is not so discombobulating or unusual to them. The rest of the world calls it unexplained mysteries. The rest of the world would be frightened and build walls and close off these areas or bomb them to stop the phenomena from occurring. And speaking of bombing, there's been plenty of that. Nuclear devices let off in specific places over the last number of years to destroy underground dwellers, to destroy their location, their portal openings, etc. Now, this latest quake in the area of Nepal, close to Everest, is also very close to extraterrestrial bases. We would say that Mount Everest would be, and the surrounding mountains, would be a key area for Anunnaki home because of its inaccessibility. And it is only a few people who get to go there. They pay large sums of money. We say few, it's hundreds, but still it's few compared to the planet. And the Anus always, and their branches on Earth, always want to remain inaccessible, whether it is the Antarctica or whether it is the Mount Everest area. So what you have going on here are incursions happening on Earth, going after areas that appear to have ultra-normal activity. We could call it paranormal, but we like ultra-normal better. This is all creating, as we've said, a lot of confusion on the psychic realms. Now, in addition to this kind of confusion, there's been a lot of speculation by various people, psychics, scientifics, renegades of all sorts, recalcitrant people, those rebelling against official words, that it's possible that some very, 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 very life-changing situations are going to happen sooner rather than later. The human psyche is alert to the future years before events occur. Many people speculate that the World Trade Centers were somewhat devoid of employees the day of 9/11 because perhaps the people felt something was going on. Well, yes, that's very legitimate. You do sense things far, far before they unfold. You have premonitions, you have feelings, and you have the ability to change your mind in any moment, to say, you know, I don't think I'll do this today, I think I'll do this, or I don't feel like going here, something's not quite supporting or right, so I think I'll do this. That's the whole point of premonition and knowing things from the future. And certainly events in your own life, the closer they are to your own direct experience, the easier they are to change. The larger events, global events, well, yes, if something's big going to happen to a city or a location that will have a global effect, you do have an inner radar that says don't go to work today or go in late or whatever. But also it is true that many people were warned to stay away on 9/11 and they are terrified. And it is a shame they have on their soul to the day they die and beyond, is that they knew something and they were told not to go in. And then when it all happened, no one wanted to say a word. It is the power of being able to control people. You have free will, you have free mind, but other forces can come in and change it. So be aware of that. And so there are a series of events that can go like dominoes this year, tumblings. It looks as if it's already confusing now, and that the events can start tumbling starting just after the autumn equinox. There are projections also where people are concerned that the climate change, global warming situation that is about terraforming, yes, and population reduction, but it is also about the presence, as we mentioned a class or two ago, of Nibiru. And that when this planet of the crossing crosses through your solar system, there tends to be systemic havoc. And that creatures and life forms and life cycles and seasonal changes and seasons and mental thinking and emotional, all of this starts to go topsy-turvy. Just observe and have, as we've said, a beliefless afternoon or two to consider these ideas and see what you are picking up on and what your job may be to shift the probes. You can change your own life, of course, but you are probably not going to chart the course of cosmic and global events. You are here to participate and to witness. All right, that said, let's pick up the ball and continue. Jim, now do you have anything more you want to ask us after we've given this bit of discussion?
Well, I have one of this is kind of off this subject, but a friend of mine, Fiona, noted that the TPP was voted on by our Senate, and it was voted down, and then we had the Baltimore
say it again, the
TPP. It's a trade
Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement.
Yeah. That was voted down, and that got a lot of press. And then the Baltimore train accident happened. That also was almost like a magic trick where it changed the newspaper headlines. And then the TPP was voted positively in the Senate. So everyone kind of, their first thing was that it's been shot down, but now it's actually been approved by the Senate and it's going to the Congress.
So there is a speculation that there was a tit for tat?
Right. Something. Yeah.
Warning shot across the bow.
Warning shot. Now listen, there's a lot of pressure, as you've known, by the president to open up the Pacific, yes, and to get trade agreements there. And they say, oh, it's not going to be like NAFTA at all. It's not going to be like Mexico and Canada and South America. You're not going to lose jobs and open borders, etc. People, the Anunnaki do not like your nationalistic stances. Because when you are nationalistic and you are all for rah-rah, your country and your president, that means that you might be a threat to some sort of mutiny. These are the owners and builders of Earth. They do not want any kind of mutinies at all. And if you've noticed Mr. Obama lately, he's looking a bit grayer and thinner. Quite a bit. He's being forced. His hand is being forced. He's not happy at all. He's being blackmailed behind the scenes, and he wishes it was just simple blackmail. When you have children, you are very vulnerable when you are a political leader. So his hands are tied, so to speak, and he's forced to push through agendas and gulp it down, and he's in a situation that he does not want to be in and cannot back out. And he is like all the other presidents. Once they realize what they are up against, they wander the halls of Washington, the White House at night, muttering to themselves, looking at the gallery of past presidents, wondering, how the blast did I end up in this situation? And what did they know? And were they also stuck with what I'm stuck with? You see, it's one thing to be lauded as president and important, and another to realize, just as the emperors of China realized, they lived at the highest levels, isolated, of course, surrounded by eunuchs, of course. No other male could be allowed in the presence of the emperor. So it was eunuchs all, and the empress and concubines. Anyone remember that? Yes. And when you became a eunuch, if you passed the test, you lived. And they saved your genitals. Gentlemen?
Big consolation.
They saved them so that there would be no violation upon death. That after you served the emperor, without any competition or your own testosterone to overthrow anything, upon your death as diviners and such, you were then reunited with your genitals. So there were people that were keepers of the male genitalia. Think about it. Perhaps that will stir some memories. So, where were we there with Jim?
Well, I'm just wondering if it was a bit of a magic trick with the Baltimore
Oh yes, sorry.
being tied in with the TPP, and because now everyone thinks it's been shot down, but in actuality,
Well, let's tie this together. So, China and the Pacific areas have certain desire to become superpower, and they are sitting on artifacts, and they have direct, let's say, lineage or direct communication, and the U.S. as the world's premier superpower is being pressured to conform to Anunnaki wishes and to carry out certain situations that would benefit a one world order, which would be the Anunnaki wanting one world. And when people who are not in the know say, well, this isn't going to do us any good, let's vote against AFTRA, NAFTA, the Pacific Agreement, situations are arranged, and then minds can be changed. And whenever you see governmental forces against something and then doing a quick turnaround, you know the old blackmail or some sort of fear in one is struck. Mr. Obama is not as effective at convincing others. He becomes too angry very quickly because of the pressure he's under. Some presidents were very good about convincing others, inspiring them, tricking them. Obama does not have that gift of working with others or winning their trust or convincing them. Therefore, he defaults again and again because he is commanded to. He defaults to executive order. Do it because we said it. This is what you are dealing with. Who else has question, comment?
Well, this is George. It's not quite on the topic there, but I had this thought when you were talking earlier about the planet of the crossing, Nibiru, getting closer, and that the closer it gets, would we have more and more anomalies, more and more black hole portals, more and more things happening because of just the energy that it's bringing through, but it's getting closer. I mean, that may be a stretch, but
It's not a stretch. It's a good point, George, because many have speculated that Nibiru would have a tail millions of miles in length because of its force and the detritus that would be involved in traveling with it. Mm-hmm. And the projection is that the tail, if Nibiru enters your system sooner rather than later and makes some sort of orbital incursion into your system, its tail would then affect the orbital plane of all the planets, right, particularly the planets that would have a closer orbit around the Sun: Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Mars being, 2 years around the Sun?
Right, 2 years, if I can, right.
Yes, so that this tail can hang around for a long time. And there is legitimate speculation that a lot of the underground facilities that have been built are there for surface people to retreat to. The problem now has arisen, and the betrayals are very great, that some of these underground facilities that were built in earnestness, secrecy of course, but in earnest, by military contractors and their hirelings, and sometimes the hirelings are treated just as the emperors and kings of old treated their hirelings, especially the pharaohs. The workers were set to dig a tomb on the, let's say, east bank of the Nile, the burial grounds, the west bank. And the workers were set to construct a tomb in the west bank, or the burial area of the Egyptian pharaohs, towards the setting sun. Everyone involved in the building of the tombs was silenced. You know this, yes? Because if they were not killed, then they would be able to tell where the important pharaoh, representative of the visitor Anunnaki, were buried. Take this and put this all around the planet. So even today, some of these underground cities that are constructed in earnestness by black military projects, the workers are silenced in different ways. They are fried in the brains so that they cannot remember. They are given amnesia, or sometimes they are simply disposed of or passed on to others for different usages. But the betrayal, deep betrayal, is this: building complex modern structures deep below the ground is an Anunnaki trick. The Anunnakis have often used the rulers of the world and to carry out their own god wars. So we've suggested to you that these Anunnaki fight one another. Family dynasties versus ancient artifacts. Who has them? Where are they buried? Are they under the ice? Are they in the Himalayas? Are they in the southwest? Are they in Shambhala? Where are these artifacts? What are these artifacts? What can they do? One of them being a very familiar one that all people would know of, and it is called the Ark of the Covenant. It would be sort of an example of a powerful Anunnaki artifact. And that Ark of the Covenant, it was Moses and his children who carried that thing around. It gave off radiation. It was a type of radio that one could speak to their God. Now, the Anunnaki have used kings and popes and presidents to imbue them with power, and then to have those leaders build up their military forces. And then the Anunnaki would create these battles on Earth between their players, sometimes solely for entertainment. Just as people today have computers and they buy games called World War something, and they play these violent video games, and the people in the games are what you call avatars or cartoons, and the runner will rape this one and chop this one in half, and the game player can do anything they want within the construct of the computer game. These computer games, of which are ruining your planet and ruining the minds of adult people, because no adult people need to be playing games. Not as much as they are on the planet. It means they have not left childhood. This is what the Anunnaki do. They get one country, such as the USA, and they impulse or inspire people to join the army and to have them be all ideal. And then they get a leader or general or someone in power to get some ideas to go and carry out unnecessary wars. And these wars and these battles are carried out as theater, as mystery plays, as drama for the Anunnaki. Yes, the wars often allow world leaders to get into location so that artifacts can be retrieved. This is what's been going on in the Middle East for the last 25 years. But you must understand that, as we said earlier, you are observed, you are toyed with, and depending upon your beliefs and your values, that's the kind of energies that you will attract that will play with you. And then you will spend thousands and thousands and thousands of lifetimes incorporating your activities and accepting responsibility for your clarity or lack thereof. Something to think about. All right. Where were we, George?
One other question that came up when you were talking. The whole shale drilling, what do you call it, fracking?
Fracking.
Could that be used as a cover-up for looking for things deep underground? In other words, is that...
Some of it is, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Here's the thing with fracking. In order for fracking to be cost-effective, at least some of these statistics that are out say that oil must be between $80 and $85 a barrel. So you have this big fracking boom from Texas, North Carolina wants in on it, the Dakotas, but oil is now scraping at $60 a barrel, and a few months ago it was 40-something. So there's no common sense to link this up. So of course there's something else going on. Getting people in location, setting things up, for example, so setting up oil rigs and things of this nature, and digging situations, and then saying, oh, it's not effective, so we're going to shut this down. Sorry, you are out of a job. Well, so they got what they wanted set up, and then they send everyone home they don't need. Do you follow this? Then the military, some people disguised as the military, or people disguised from themselves who don't even know who they really are, go in and carry out jobs. The big thing that is going on is dealing with what is going on beneath the surface of the earth. and what is coming out of this surface in greater number. So when you said, George, the presence of Nibiru, can it really create more phenomena? Absolutely. It is traditionally known as a destabilizer. That it's passing through this system and its own periodicity can create great disturbances. Now back to these underground cities. So not only did the military build bolt holes that people could exit to. Have you ever been to an underground where there's shopping and malls and perhaps train stations and all of this? They're all over the earth. If you humans can build this, then what can the Anunnakis build? So the point we are getting is this: these cities way underground, mile or two below the mantle, they've been built and then they've been taken over. So that is the big betrayal, is that the surface people thought that these cities that they were building in earnest, even China is building them, they thought that they were going to be for the military and selected families to go into in case of surface disturbances, mutinies, electromagnetic pulses, and any other crazy cosmic connections. But now they are finding that these underground areas have other beings dwelling there. Build it and they will come. It's just not who they thought. So we are saying to you that, again, more inside scoopings here, nothing so secret that can't be brought out, and of course, how would we know except by reading the what's in the ethers? Again, so much stress on the surface leaders. They are not certain what's what, and then recently you have the new Pope here. We still call him the new Pope, the last Pope as he's been referred to. The last Pope because of certain other situations that will occur, but he recently set things into turmoil. He supported, he came out against Turkey, and they are all up in arms in Turkey about him, about the, Armenians, the genocide of the Armenians, and now he's recognizing Palestine. This is not making people happy at all. This Pope is following instructions. He goes up into that orb at the top of the basilica, and he is able to receive communications. Lots to think about, yes?
Yeah.
This is going to be quite a year of, as we've been discussing with you, George, and others, Saturn, Neptune aspects, creating the big question: what is really real? What is real? And as people start to recognize what they thought is real is not, they may lose heart. They may become sick. They may start to say, well, who cares? I'm just going to do this. It's all going up in steam. And you may get a lot of people losing their mental stability because of so much chaos. We'll go back to questions in a moment, but we want to give you a few heads up on maintaining yourself in terms of health and all of this. There are quite a number of components that make up your well-being. And nutrition, of course, many people are pointing to change your food habits, change what you eat, and you certainly can change the chemical outcome in the body. You are a chemical soup on one level, and so if you change the chemistry of your food, you are certainly going to change the chemistry of your biology. Also, your emotions, how you feel about things, is of utmost importance. Too many people are used to being polite, or they suffer from nice-itis, which is a very, very severe disease. Nice-itis, always having to say things to make sure that no one looks at you cross-eyed. Make sure that you please everyone except yourself. And so that nice-itis goes with stuff it, stuff it, stuff it, stuff it, stuff it. And people are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. China does not have the big people that you have. It's working on it, but they do not have the big people that you have in the USA. They're catching up, though. Then you have your mental attitude, your mental confusion about what cancer is, what heart disease is, what diabetes is, and you're being bombarded. You cannot open a magazine where every few pages there are few more pages of drugs and all of the side effects. Number one is always death. Take this drug, it will help you, but please know this first side effect is nausea, fainting, mental disturbances, and death and suicide. So there you have it. So you have nutrition, very important. You have emotional connection to how you really feel, and do you have the freedom to express how you feel? Do you give yourself permission to tell the truth, or do you suffer from nice-itis or fear? Mental confusion, because you don't want to change your beliefs and it's too much going on. Then you have stress. Stress is probably the biggest cause of throwing people off balance. Whatever stresses you, whatever gets you all crazed, it sets your mental going, it sets your emotional going, and then it sets your nutrition going, because when people are in stress, they do whatever they want to alleviate the stress. So, nutrition, mental, emotional, then stress. And then to help yourself deal with all of this, you must detox. These are traditional approaches to health. But on top of all this, you have timeline connections. Who have you been in the past, and what so-called karma are you working off in this lifetime to help balance the score, so to speak? What have you taken on in other lifetimes that is currently affecting the fulfillment of your life in the present? And if you have been a eunuch, for example, caught up in that game, losing your genitals from long ago, or even losing them today, many females are being mutilated all over the Muslim world. Why? Because it is forbidden for women to have pleasure. So then you have rules that are making no sense. So as we said, the main components, nutrition, mental, emotional, stress, and detoxification, that will do something for you. But what's your soul's story? What is it that is nagging at you, that plays a major role in your life, and yet you have not figured out that it's a carryover, a pain, unresolved understanding from another lifetime, particularly in the first three chakras, most particularly in the first three chakras. And then for some people, the fifth, the throat. Loss of punishment along the lines of time shuts the throat chakra down. When the throat chakra is closed down, the person is ripe and ready for sexual abuse. It goes sort of hand in hand. And then the other component to factor in when you are talking about your well-being and your health and your vitality is when you become ill, and when something is not working in your body in optimum capacity. What is the positive purpose that this illness serves? These are the real questions. What gets carried over from other lifetimes that all the nutrition in the world is not going to fix? And when things are not working, how is it that you are creating what you want to get what you want, even if you have to use subversive, passive-aggressive situation? Sometimes the positive purpose is to clean the slate of situations that no longer serve you. Sometimes the positive purpose is to exit. It's time to die because you do not have the wherewithal to deal with the situation. Sometimes the positive purpose is to put you in a position so that you can receive love and caring, when generally you don't know how to ask for it or don't know how to receive it. When you are very vulnerable and you can't walk, or you can't wipe your bottom, or you can't feed yourself, then the positive purpose is to allow you to allow others to help you out when it is needed. Independence is admirable, but sometimes independence, too much of it, becomes stubborn isolationism. So that is a bit of consideration for our listeners and our attendees on the points of physical well-being. Now let's get back to discussion. Who has something they want to bring up here?
This is Jean.
Jean, welcome.
Yes, this is going back to the discussion about, all the leaders being so actually very directly in contact with the Anunnaki overlords, directing them and so forth.
Yes, and can you see by the faces, the looks on their faces, that no one looks too carefree?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good. We just wanted to make certain that. All right, Jean, what's your question?
Well, one thing a lot of people noticed with during the first debate between Obama and Mitt Romney,
Yes.
the elections, that that was after the huge scandal exploded for Romney. We figured, oh, there's no way in the world, the secret video that was taped by.
Oh yes, when he talked about the
47%.
47%.
People thought, okay, this is over. I mean, why are we even bothering? Can't we just stop now? Let's stop wasting time and money. And everyone thought Obama was like, oh, it's just handed him on a platter. Of course he's going to win this debate. And then he bombed horribly and ended up losing it. And
yes, and do you remember the night he bombed horribly, how sick he looked?
Yes, that's the point I'm bringing up. Is
they
like
were blackmailing.
Both, they looked. People could figure out that they came out and they just had these terrible looks in their faces.
That's because of what they were doing to their children.
It was like almost I felt, does he get instructions? Go easy on him. We don't want.
He attempted to throw it.
Oh, okay.
He attempted to get out of it. And why did they not want Romney? Because Romney is basically his own man.
Mm.
He follows some instructions, but he is a die-hard true believer of Mormonism. Mormonism simply being another branch of the Anunnaki teachings, of course. Mm-hmm. You are not going to go into any religion that is not dominated by the Anunnaki. Mm-hmm. It is impossible. Be let's just say that tit for tat's being replayed now because another fellow was said to be at fault for Mitt Romney's loss. Not only Mitt Romney and his 47% stumbling there, and believe us when we say that Obama and others have said much, much worse. That was just insider fighting. It was a little fellow named George Stephanopoulos or something of this nature. He asked the dangerous question about abortion of Mitt Romney, and it was said that because of little Stephanopoulos' their audacity, that made Romney look like a fool, and they blame him for losing it. Now, who just got taken down quite mightily? Little Stephanopoulos.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. So the bottom line is it doesn't make any difference who the players are. There's nastiness on the inside. Nasty, nasty, nastiness. And no one is who they say they are. And they come out with their apologies and their smiles, and we'll say all of these people are two-faced. They are all nasty players. And have you seen a movie called Hunger Games?
No, I haven't seen it. I'm aware of it.
We do not recommend movies. That is not our forte. But we would suggest that if you can stomach it, that you watch a version or two of this particular portrayal, which is campy, to say the least, but it is campy in such a way that it's over the top in showing you how phony everything is in the movie. And watching the movies, the various series of it, take away how phony everything is in the world that you see. You tend to give people too many passes there, Jean. Whether it is Bill Cosby or Michelle Obama, if we remember correctly. And you give people loyalty that do not deserve loyalty because you yourself are a good person. You project onto others what you want them to be rather than what they are. And do not let their race, their religion, their ethnicity stand in your way. Recognize a sleaze when you see it. Because if you don't, this is personal for you now, this is your test in this lifetime, to be able to unequivocally say this is a good person and this is not, and have no prejudice within it. You with us?
Yes.
Good. If you pass this test and you don't get color-blinded by any of the things that have influencing people's color-blindness, then you will come through it. And we will say this on a big level, whether it is religions or races, and gender issues. Religions, races, and gender issues. These are being thrown in front of you people to trip you up and to trap you into political correctness or loyalties without recognizing how much mind control and mind mucking is going on. All of you need to say a prayer at the end of your days, every night before you go to bed, and make an intention that the forces that work with you bring you ever greater clarity of mind and peace in your heart. That's quite simple, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Ever greater clarity of mind and peace in my heart. That is a powerful conditioning, because clarity of mind is what is absolutely needed, required by all people. And peace in the heart means that whatever you see, you are still going to be able to be peaceful. This is an accomplishment extraordinaire. What else, Jean?
Well, I guess along those lines of, say, what our world leaders are actually dealing with once they get into office, I wondered, like during the 60s with the Kennedys and also Martin Luther King, were their deaths the result of maybe not following orders they were given, especially with the Kennedys?
Oh, absolutely. All three. The two Kennedys and Martin Luther King. The mistake they made with Martin Luther is he wasn't going to follow orders. He was a spokesperson for the black people. He was a very powerful force and he could rally them. But he was a threat because, again, the Anunnaki in their realm, the thing that they feel most threatened by is mutiny. And so their representatives on earth, popes, presidents, princes, etc., kings, they are also afraid of mutiny, or another term called civil war. Remote viewers in the 60s were deathly afraid of reporting what they saw, which was a re-stimulation of the Civil War from the 1860s. And you recall how much civil unrest was growing. Kennedy, the president, was killed in 1963. It was insider job, of course, and Lyndon Johnson was the one who benefited the most. He's the one who winked and closed his eyes to certain situations. Others, even the Bushes, were involved in carrying out this assignment. Kennedy was too much of a rogue, and he would not follow orders, and he was getting very interested, too interested from some points of view, in the hidden UFO stories that were coming out. If you remember, he said, this is John Kennedy now, we are going to put someone on the moon. You were already on the moon. The Nazis had already been to the moon. They had already been taking people up and showing them what was up there. So he could not be controlled. Bobby Kennedy, his brother, they were very caught up in being good pals. They shared women. They shared Jackie. They shared Marilyn Monroe. They shared many of their women together. And this was the way they were blackmailed, the way they were infiltrated. Marilyn Monroe also falls in that window. She was taken out just before Kennedy was killed because she was going to blab too many things. The Kennedy boys couldn't keep their zippers up, so to speak, as the expression goes, which will always get you in big trouble when you are in politics. Robert, of course, he knew a lot. He wanted to go after crime. That was a cover for other things. The crime lords, etc. All that was drug running and gambling and all that. That was simply cover for much bigger fish. And Martin Luther, he was taken out because, again, remote viewers saw that had he stayed alive, the potential to have a second civil war come down in this country was very great. He was taken out. He was not taken out by the man who was blamed for his killing. Secret forces do all of these things, and the people who are held that are responsible are never the ones involved, just as Sirhan Sirhan with Robert Kennedy. Yes, he was mind control slave, he's sent there, but others did the killings. Same with Martin Luther King and JFK. So, you get too close to the truth, you prove to be too much of a revolutionary or recalcitrant, and you are taken out. The downside was that King, who was no shiny emerald himself, he cheated on his wife relentlessly. If the Kennedys couldn't keep their zippers up, Martin's was down all the time. He was a classless man, so to speak. There are many, let's say, stories of his lack of ethics, but he was true to his people in his dream and wanting equality. This was where the threat came in. Why? Because long ago, in ancient Africa, when the Anunnaki were building their clones and building their breeding pairs, they color-coded them. You call it races or ethnicity. And the black race was utilized, constructed as a race of workers. Not that the other humans were not, but the black race in particular, that was isolated in Africa, in Enki's land, was there to carry out very heavy old labor under the ground in the mines. To this day, that memory of not being treated equal to the other clone types of other colors and races has stayed within the black race. And it is a stigma and a conditioning that must be overcome without victimhood. And Martin Luther King was considered to be a potential threat to start or to be, let's say, the inspiration behind race wars that he did not want himself. Does this help expand your perceptions a bit, Jean?
Yes, yeah.
Good. Remember, sometimes heroes are constructed. They are not heroes at all. Sometimes they are dark characters, and the white race has many of them, that are put up there as noble people, when in actuality they are quite flawed and they are big betrayers. Nothing is exactly as it appears to be. That was the beeper, yes?
Yes.
So we are at the end of this afternoon's discussion. In summation, we suggested that it is time for everyone to go to a new level. We also suggested that we would deliver to you a higher dose of energy this afternoon. An energy that can elevate you, that can bring good things, and that will give you opportunity, a gift from the Pleiades for the next 5 days. Use it wisely, dear friends. And also, invest in your perceptions. Allow your perceptions to grow and to tune in as if you are a device that can directly interact with the cosmos, the information that wants to be explained, that wants to be explored. This is part of your role, dear friends. You are compelled to understand, accept it, and enjoy it. It has been our great pleasure. Good afternoon.